Welcome to the Moving the Needle podcast. Canada has a thriving television and film industry, employing hundreds and thousands of people. Like many parts of the country, my home city, Toronto, is a hub for many shows and for production studios. But like all parts of our lives, this industry has also been challenged by the pandemic. Not only has it had to deal with postponements and cancellations of filming, productions, and festivals due to travel restriction and physical distancing measures, it has also had to deal with massive layoffs, and perhaps is only now beginning to recover.
Absolutely, Senator. The pandemic comes on the heels of a complete overhaul of the industry. Streaming giants like Netflix, Disney Plus have changed the way Canadians watch shows and films. Going to a movie theater is not the only way people watch movies anymore. This change may create some challenges, but also creates a whole new set of opportunities for our artists.
You're so right, because with disruption comes innovation. We had the distinct pleasure to speak to world-renowned director and one of my closest friends, Deepa Mehta, for this broadcast. And we had a great discussion about her new film, Funny Boy, and what it's like to make movies in Canada. Let's get to the interview. Welcome to Moving the Needle. Today, we're talking to a really special person, my friend and world-renowned filmmaker, Deepa Mehta. Deepa has had an astonishing career telling unique and important stories. She's well known for her Elements trilogy, Fire, Earth and Water, where the last film, Water, which was made in 2005, was Canada's official entry to the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And just recently, she's given the same honor again for her new film, Funny Boy, which will represent Canada at the Academy Awards in the category of Best International Film. Deepa, you're an incredibly busy person, and I really want to thank you for speaking with us today. So let's get on with the question. You and I have known each other for a very long time, actually, since we were born, and we won't talk about how long ago that was.
No, we won't. Talk about that.
But we do talk often about our identities, whether and if and how we are sometimes more Canadian, sometimes more Indian. So help our readers and help our listeners understand how you navigate and negotiate these very different identities and more. And how do you represent in your own work the conflict of identities centered around what I know about you, which is you are truly Canadian?
That's interesting. I mean, I felt for many years, as you know, and our listeners perhaps don't know, that I was born in Amritsar, which is in northern Punjab, but so were you. And we went to school in India, we went to university in India, and we got married in India, and came to Canada. I felt, and we pursued our different careers, and I'm so proud of you. I really am. I'm proud of what you do. I'm so proud of what you do for people who want to come to Canada. People who are not welcome or find that they can't breathe in their own countries. You have given them a refuge. So whenever I see something about you, or I hear some Syrian that I meet in a supermarket talk about, it was Senator Ratna Umidwar who helped us come here. I mean, I can't, and in places like Brighton, I'm not talking about Toronto. Anyway, what I'm saying is the admiration is mutual for different reasons. I feel that my stories all come from India, or mostly come from India. Stories that inspire me, stories that are about patriarchy, that are about the rough time women have had in a patriarchal society, talking about how you always feel the other. I mean, India has 728 official languages, and every province is different from the other. And how a country that's essentially probably like Europe has become a country. There are many aspects of India, and there are many aspects of India that really inspire me. And I've said very often, and I'll say it again, that if India inspires me with her stories, Canada gives me the freedom to tell the stories. And that combination for me is paramount. Because what's the point of stories if you can't express them? And what's the point of expressing stories that do not move you, or do not want you to have a conversation about things that are important to me? Inequality is important to me. The desire to be seen as somebody who's a different color is important to me. There's a Yeah, that's enough. I think I've said enough.
That's beautiful. Um, you've told the stories of other people, other places in your movies. I want to hear a bit of your own story. What was it like for you when you came to Canada in the 1970s? How did you experience being new, being different? I mean, you came in very different circumstances than I did. You married a Canadian and came to Canada. There's a safety in that route, but there's also dangers and strangeness and everywhere. So why don't you tell us a bit about your story?
Well, it was very interesting. I remember it's years ago when I was getting married to Paul Salzman, who was my ex-husband, and we were getting married in Delhi. There was a part of my mother came to me just before the bride is sort of given away, and she said, "You look deeply unhappy." And I said, "Why? But I'm supposed to be happy." And she said, she said, "Are you all right? Are you sure you want to leave India?" It wasn't about Paul. It was about I was such a sort of flag bearer always. It wasn't everything that I'd done was about the celebration of the diversity, of the conflict of India. And she said, "Are you sure you'll be able?" And I said, "Of course." You know, when you're young, you feel that life is going to last forever. And I said, "Mom, I'm not going to Canada forever. I'll just go there for a couple of years, check it out, and if I don't like it, I'll come back." Famous last words when you're young. I mean, I was like 21 or something ridiculous. But when I came here, and you started. Paul had a job. I didn't have a job. I had the toughest time trying to find some work. I'd done film. Our father's film distributors, your father, my father. I grew up in movie halls, and I loved film. I'd done my first documentaries in India. The first one I did was called Vimla, and I wanted to pursue a career, but there was no way I could find any work. And so I remember, out of desperation, one day calling the Indian consulate here in Toronto and saying, "Do you have a job for a receptionist? Can I do anything that would connect me to India?" Because I was feeling so disenfranchised. And going to Paul's friend's house somewhere, I don't know, down, I don't know, somewhere in Midtown or something, and sitting in the garden, very nice people, and next door hearing a kid say, "Oh my God, I can smell parking shit." I mean, things like that always have such an impact on you. And I was looking around and saying, "What are they talking about?" Till I realized that they were talking about me. Or going to a baseball game with a friend. And these aren't sob stories. This is about reality. And that very nice couple, very bright, turned to me and said, "Oh God, you speak really good English." And I thought I was being very funny. And I said, "Oh, I learned it on the plane coming over." And she said, "Oh, really good." She actually believed me. So it was like, I mean, how do you, Ratna, and we've talked about Funny Boy, for example. The last line of Funny Boy is the one that's the most important to me, which is where a bunch of refugees from Sri Lanka who have been persecuted, who've gone through the genocide with the civil war, Tamil one arrive here. Tamil refugees arrive at Lester Pearson Airport, and the last line of the film is where the mother says, with her children, they're sitting in a car, it's snowing, she's got sandals on, they're unprepared for what's happening, and but they know that they're safe here. And she says, you know, in this new world, we are free slaves, and that hasn't changed, because for me, Canada will change when we actually change the preconceptions of what we are. We are. The preconception of a kid 30 years ago said he smelled khaki shit. Um, Somebody thought I learned English in on a plane, and now, 20 years ago, every Indian was a motel owner. And these preconceptions, that does it come from education? Maybe I feel I learned world history in school. Did anybody learn world history in Canada? It's when are we going to be free of that? Anyways,
I think your work actually is part of an informal curricula of world history. If your stories are all about people caught up in situations that might be individual or personal, but they are in a broader political context. One of my favorite movies of yours, which I think most people may not know of, is a film about it's called Sam and Me, and it's about an old Jewish senior citizen who's going partly senile, and his caregiver is a young Indian immigrant. In fact, I had a bit of a role in the movie, which you kindly cast me in, which I think I was terrible at. But every film of yours, from Sam and Me to Funny Boy, to Fire, Earth and Water, they're all situated within a political context. They're not just the stories of one person. They're the stories of people caught up in situations that are beyond their control. So what do you hope people take away from your film? I mean, there's obviously the compassion that you bring, the empathy that you evoke with people in these situations, but you also leave something behind with, at least I think you do, because every time I've seen a movie of yours, I've come away more curious about the political situation. I've read about it. I felt deeply about it. Is that your legacy in world history, so to say?
I don't know if it's my legacy, but you just um, you've hit upon something that which is very true for me, which is that what drives me to make the films I do. And generally, I would say, most of the time, it's curiosity. So whether it's a film about um, domestic violence that happens to immigrant women when they migrate to, let's say, Canada or anywhere, when they leave home, it's Heaven on Earth is one of my favorite films. I forget that I did it because I like it so much. I like it because it informs the absolute abject loneliness of young women who get into arranged marriages, come to Canada, have no safety net at all. Their parents, their cousins, their friends have all are left behind in India. And they come, and if they're abused, where do they go? And so I started a drive. I said, after doing the film, I said, we must have, when Indian women come, or any women from anywhere in the world come to Canada, uh, please give them a piece of paper that tells them that if they have any problems, this is a phone number they can call.
Mm.
So the film itself was one that started with curiosity about what do women who are abused or who are abjectly lonely and have nowhere to go, who can they reach out to? And I found out that they couldn't reach out to anybody. So, it was that was one of the reasons. And Earth, I think I'm not saying anything new, Ratna. I mean, I believe uh, that what Toni Morrison said is absolutely true, that all art is political. And Brecht said that too. I mean, you would know more than me, and I'll probably butcher the quote. Really, I mean, it's that if reality is a mirror, then art is the hammer. And I think I think he's right. I think Toni Morrison is right. I think that whether we know it or not, all art is political.
And I know you, and I know you are political in the work that you do, and the work that you've done in Canada has brought you a lot of accolades, awards, and fame. I know that when I go out with you and we sit in a restaurant, 9 times out of 10, we're going to get disturbed by someone wanting to take a photograph of you or get your autograph, and that's par for the course. But I think there's a downside to fame. How have you experienced it? The loss of personal freedom, the loss of space, the feeling of being constrained. Can you give voice to that?
I've never felt that, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to Canada for many things. Like I said, freedom is one of them. Freedom of expression is one of them. Um, uh, Getting awards is really nice, but somebody says unless you're really, really famous, one thing that like quasi fame, which is where I put myself in, is where it gets you is that it gets you in front of the line, and that's the only thing that it does. And I'm not being facetious, but that's the reality of it. But the downside is, so the upside is many. Recognition is par for the course, and etc. But the downside is also, I mean, I don't think anything in life, Ratna, comes without the yin and the yang. It is, it. So the upside is really high, but the downside is equally low. And I think that in my case, because if I made rom-coms, I think I would be fine. I mean, all my films were about songs and dances. I mean, which Bollywood, Hollywood was, because
Yes,
that's what I really wanted to do. I really wanted to have a great time after water was shut down in India, and it was such fun. It was, and that was different. But anything else that I've done after that, because I think life is short, is because I'm really curious about my whole thing with Funny Boy was written, for example, 24 years ago. But I think that the work that you did with refugees and that we were involved with earlier, more David than me, uh, was really got me curious about this book. What happened? What kind of lives have people led? And because I met many Syrians, I mean, the whole idea of refugees being, yes, of course, they're down and out and they're dying and it's really tough. But they're also refugees who had a good life, including you, Ratna, in Iran, who were quote unquote privileged. Does that mean when they come here that they're treated any differently or not? So that whole world of privileged refugees and their loss in a different way is equal to the loss of many other people, because they are actually put down even more than quote unquote a refugee who's had a really rough time. And that didn't seem to me that this is something that one should shut out. Just because you're privileged, you haven't lost everything. For me, that was very important. So it's curiosity, and the downside is that when you do a film like Funny Boy, or you do a film like Water, which was celebrated, or Fire, or whatever, is that people, you're out there, your face is out there, and you are. And somebody said to me when water was shut down in India, they said, I said, I don't understand why it's happening. I haven't even made the film. The script went through the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. They said yes, which they have to. They sent an officer there with you to make sure that you shoot what you said you would. And one day you wake up and you go for a shoot, and the film is called Anti-Hindu. I didn't understand it. And and I think it was a very wise man, I think it was Mahesh Bhatt, who turned to me and he said, "You're a very easy target." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you're not, you're a Canadian.
Yeah.
You might look like an Indian, but you are considered an NRI, which is non-resident Indian. You don't live here. You are seen as somebody who has the privilege of the West, who has come here to do a film that may be seen as being exploiting the way women are treated in India, and to be an easy target. But that's the downside of fame.
Of fame.
Yeah.
All your films that you have made to date, as far as I know, have all been financed by telephone or Canadian investors. Let me.
Mm,
No?
well, no, Earth wasn't,
I
Fire
see.
wasn't,
Wasn't.
uh, um, you
But
know,
your two Oscar-nominated films.
Anatomy of Violence wasn't. But Telefilm has been. Sam and Me was not by Telefilm,
Okay.
which is interesting. So I think that Telefilm came on board with Water.
With
Yes.
Water, and they came on board with Funny Boy. And so I want to ask you a
And
question
with,
about
and
that.
with Hollywood, and
And
with
yeah,
I was really impressed by the way they came aboard on Heaven on Earth, which is the film about domestic violence in Canada.
so I want to ask you what it says to you about Canada that not once but twice you've been nominated for Canada's entry into the best foreign film for a film that is set somewhere else, tells the story of another place in a language that may not be English, because many of your movies are not in English. What does that tell you about Canada?
You know, when you asked me that question, the first answer that came to my, or not an image that came to my mind was, thank God Canada is not America. I mean, which is sort of a weird thing to say, but because I think when I think of Canada, and the reason I like Canada is it's really trying as a country to do something more than pay lip service to inclusion. It's really trying. It's a long process, but I feel we are chipping away at it, and it gives me hope. And that is to be applauded in these really, really dark times. I'm a very proud Canadian who happens to be Indian. But first, I'm a Canadian.
And as a Canadian, I think you've made some comments in the past that Canadian funding for films by Canadian filmmakers is only available to films that are made in English or French, and I understand it's also possible to get funding for films made in an indigenous language.
Yes.
You made a film, Water. The movie is in Hindi, not in English. But to fulfill the requirements of telefilm, you had to actually make an English version, which no one ever saw. Which never
Luckily.
saw the light of
Luckily.
Okay. Okay. Do you think we should reconsider the criteria on language for, I mean, there are filmmakers who are Canadian who may want to make a film in Pashto. There are filmmakers who may want to make a film in Arabic or in any of the many languages that are so much part of our Canadian multicultural fabric. Should we extend that facility as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that to extend the facility that will include, because what are films all about, Ratna? Films, sorry, Senator Umidwar. What what are films all about? They're all about stories. And where do stories come from? Stories come from different experiences. Variety is so essential to storytelling. Like Shakespeare said, there are only three stories, but it's the way we tell them. And the way we tell them stories actually come from our personal histories. We have people from, like you said, I mean, it would be wonderful if we could, if a director who's got a Canadian citizenship, who's lived in Canada for 3 years or even 2 years or whatever it takes, decides to do a film in Pashto, why not? I said they have a criteria. The criteria should be the director is Canadian, the producer is Canadian, and we want to, we don't want Americans to come here and get the telefilm money unless, it's like, come on, give us a break. Uh, they've got their own studios, but we do need telefilm. But we more than politics. It's about we need stories. How can our stories be limited to what is considered politically correct right now? I'm a Canadian citizen. The guy who came in, or the young lady who's coming from the Punjab, wants to make her film. If she wants to make it in Punjabi or in Manchurian, why not? But she should be Canadian. That I understand. Yeah.
Now, you one of the things that the film industry is kind of going through now, and I guess I'll ask sort of two questions at the same time, because there's it seems in Canada, but also in around the world, the film industry is sort of grappling with a changing landscape. On the one hand, you have the pandemic that has at least initially halted productions, halted filmmaking, TV stories, and they've had to adapt to what that new landscape of physical distancing and all that sort of stuff. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how the film industry is adapting to that. But the second sort of major change that started a few years ago, but will continue along after even the pandemic is over, is the emergence of the streaming services and the streaming giants like Netflix or Disney Plus or Apple TV or whatever it is. There's lots of obviously some positive things that have come out to that for people to be able to see various films, lots of potentially new money into films because all of these services need content. But also then there's maybe some downsides to that where, people looking at films in Canada and the United States or wherever, movie theaters don't necessarily have the films anymore because of the production of films by Netflix or otherwise. So I'd like to hear your sort of talk about the pandemic and how that's been impacting, filmmaking and also the emergence of the streaming giants like Netflix.
Paul, I think that the emerging of the streaming giants happened about like 5 years ago, and before the pandemic. And about 3 years ago, it got to a point where actually art cinema was really threatened because people were not going to a movie hall. And then movie halls also started changing the way they presented a film. So you could go and have popcorn, or you could have a glass of wine before you see a movie. So it started changing with the time. How do you attract people to come to a movie hall? And they were already starting to do it, knowing that they were competing with people who had huge screens in their house if they could afford it, or saw a film on their cell phone. I mean, as a filmmaker, it's great to be able to have my film, which is a small art house film. This is not Wonder Woman. This is not Deadpool. To go to Varsity in Toronto and see it in a movie hall. But I also know that the combination of both a streaming and a theatrical release is the best thing that could happen to a filmmaker, because one is an opportunity for people to go to and see a film in a large screen where it was shot for a large screen, and it's an audience that they close the doors and you have a captive audience. You aren't using your cell phone. You aren't being disturbed because your kid wants something. You are focused on the film. And as a filmmaker, everybody wants that their attention should be there. But the point is, the reality is that how long can it last in a movie theater? We know that the streaming platform, and I'm grateful for that, to Netflix and to Apple, the two streaming things that I've worked with. because the life of the film is extended. So I'm sort of like a sucker. I say I want both. I'm very greedy. I want the theatrical release, which is happening for Funny Boy for a week, but at least it's happening. It can't happen in Ontario, sadly. But and then it's going to be on Netflix on the 10th. I mean, that's the best thing because then I have the best of both worlds.
Yes, I remember us as children wanting it all. And I
Yes,
think that still endures. We
I
wanted it all.
know, I
I
know.
want to remember one episode from our childhood. And it's really a telling episode because it's about, I think, the start of your filmmaking career. We were kids, and every year at Diwali, we would put on the Diwali show. And I remember you distinctly directing me to behave more like a monkey because you cast me as Hanuman. That was great fun. But now we are in a different world, and the thrust is towards ensuring racial equity in everything we do. That's the other pandemic.
Yep.
And I wonder if you can comment on, I kind of see the arts as actually being more open to diversity than other sectors of society because art and culture are less rigid in that way. But I wonder, from your point of view, what do you think the creative arts, filmmaking, what do you need to do to make sure that your industry is more inclusive and diverse?
I think first of all, art being whether it's performance or whether it's a symphony, whether it's an exhibit of paintings or whether it's a film, um, is more visible than many other things. I mean, it's even, it takes time to sit and read a book. It's so easy to actually go out and see a trailer for 1 minute, 30 seconds and make a judgment based on the trailer or what the art is or what the film is. So for art is, I think, yes, it's political and that's really good, and yet it's also vulnerable. So that means that we have to really, really be careful of what we put out. And I'm learning the hard way that perhaps when is, and I'm worried sometimes when is something that's when is outrage which is based on very little knowledge going to actually define who we are, and that scares me.
Well, it's interesting because, and the senator, I think we'll talk a little bit more about Funny Boy in a second. I just wanted to talk a little bit about one last thing, on when it comes to what diversity and what is necessary for that to work in films, and in the government in particular. The federal government here in Canada is very active in supporting films. We already talked a little bit about telefilm. It is an arm's length body of the government, but it's funded by the government, and that. And then it also has, the government just came out with a new bill, that's looking at trying to change the landscape for a number of things, including the streaming giants, including, more diversity for racialized groups and also Indigenous artists. What do you think, and you've already talked a little bit about, with telefilm having the ability to work outside of just English and French and various other languages, but is there something that the government should be thinking about, either in the concept of the bill that's before Parliament now, or just in general, that is necessary to nurture artists in Canada?
Yes, they can. I mean, I think that and I am really grateful to Telefilm Canada and to Canadian bodies, whether it's Canada Council or Canada Arts or whether it's CBC, Film Matters, that they are really trying. The challenge is when is it going to be something more than tokenism? That is what really worries me. So
Okay.
don't hire me because I'm a colored woman. Hire me because you think that my script deserves to be made. And if there's somebody else who I'm in competition with, then then I would really consider that, hey, I've had the short end of the stick for many years. Maybe I should be given a little bit more consideration. Not complete, but a little bit more. But I do not want tokenism, because tokenism can really, this is a fight. I mean, this is, Paul, the window is open. Everybody's into wanting to do the politically correct thing, and they should, for BIPOC people. But the minute it's open is the minute it starts closing. So we better be out there if we want to be seen. But don't hire me on your board or on the telefilm board because I'm colored. Hire me because you think I can do the job. And there are many of us who can do the job. You just have to look a little bit harder.
You're
Tokenism really worries me. Yeah.
you're so right, Deepa. We could have a whole different conversation about when we've been tokenized and how we've
Oh, yeah.
responded to it, but we could do that. I want to close our conversation today with the movie that you have just made, Funny Boy, which you're no stranger to controversy. You talked a little bit about it. Controversy and fame maybe go hand in hand. Most recently, this controversy about the casting of Funny Boy, the language, how it's spoken, has erupted. I've seen the film, and I think it is absolutely beautiful. And it tells the story of this young gay boy in a troubled situation in Sri Lanka, in really human and compassionate ways, and I'm rooting for it to go to win the Oscar. What would you like the listeners of this podcast to know about the film and the controversy?
Interesting. I mean, the book that's based on the film is based on is called Funny Boy as well. It's written by Shyam Selvadure, who is it's semi-autobiographic, and I think he would agree too. He is half Tamil and half Sinhalese. He grew up in Sri Lanka. He grew up gay, and I don't know if many people know that, but to be queer in Sri Lanka is still a criminal offense. And he came with his family in 1983 to Canada as refugees. They were so-called, they left everything behind. They literally came here. So the book was written 24 years ago. Many people optioned it, and they didn't make it. And then finally, 3 years ago, Shyam came up to me and said, here is, I've written the script, maybe, and I want you to look at it. And I looked at the script, and the script was 250 pages long. So that is impossible to do as a film. Luckily for me, Shyam said, I'll help you. You make it your own. And we worked on it together. For me, it was extremely important, as it was for Shyam, that the film was set in Sri Lanka, that the film was, RG, who's the gay protagonist, was actually a gay young man, because we wanted that representation to be essential. That was a very important part for us, because the vulnerability of somebody who is in that situation was extremely important. We wanted, if we could get a Tamil actor who was queer to play that in Sri Lanka or even in Toronto, we really would have loved that. We looked at many people. I've got auditions coming out of my ears that are actually on record of how many people we auditioned, Sri Lankan Tamils, to play RG or to play Jagan or to play Appa. Not only here, but also in Colombo, and also in one in New York and one in London. And it didn't, for different reasons, it didn't happen. Two that I loved here couldn't do it. One was getting his father's bypass, so he had to be there, and one could not get a visa. Anyway, the point is, we really wanted it. Finally, we settled for a Sri Lankan. That was very important. Finally, we settled for a gay Sri Lankan. That was extremely important to Shyam and to me. That young man, Brandon Ingram, is living in Sri Lanka. He put his life on the line to play this role. And for me to see some Sri Lankan Tamils actually putting him down for something like that is heartbreaking. They should be celebrating that. But okay, each to their own. The language in the middle of the COVID, there's a lockdown. The actors are in Sri Lanka. We were supposed to go and fix it in Sri Lanka. We couldn't. The COVID eased up a bit. We fixed every line. And I'm sounding defensive, but I'm sad. I'm sad to be accused of actually doing harm to a people that whose fate I actually have complete empathy with. Empathy to an extent that people who have seen the film, Tamil people who have seen the film, understand that this film is so pro-Tamil and what happened to them is so anti and genocide. The reason I wanted to do this film, Ratna, was because to build bridges, to build solidarity, to finally talk about maybe love can conquer hatred. That's it.
So I think I hear the anxiety. I also hear the sadness in your voice.
I'm very sad. I'm very sad.
But I know this about you. I know this about you, Deepa, that when you're sad and when you're unhappy, that is the time for the great well of your creativity. And whether you recognize it or not, right at this very moment, you're thinking about your next work. And I, for one, want to wish you, here's one Canadian and two Canadians, Paul and me, who wish you all the very best in the Oscars and in your next work of creativity, because I know it's already taken a seed somewhere. And I want to thank you for your time. You're very busy.
Ratna, I can tell you something which I just found out like 2 minutes ago. So I want to share it with you and Paul. I just found out that Hollywood Reporter, which is the newspaper, said they make their predictions for the Oscars, and they said for the foreign language films, the top 5 out of the top 5, one is Funny Boy. So that's the good news. So
there you go. There you go. There you go. All the very best. Continue to bring knowledge, power, and stories to Canadians, and continue to help us make Canada a better place and bring that Oscar home. We wish you all the very best.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Senator Umidwar, I love you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.